Okay, we can probably start. Welcome everyone to this meetup with Espen, who is a CPO at Kolonial. In case you're new in this format, in this meetup, my name is Kristian. I work at Iterate. Um, Iterate builds new ventures. So we have a venture portfolio now of 12 companies. These are either built internally and spun out, or they are built in collaboration with others. Um, my role there is to support the product teams and be uh, sorry, my phone is competing for attention now. I'll try to turn it off. My role at Iterate is supporting the product teams and helping them do good product practices. Basically, we found that the role of product management is hugely important in the success of these companies. And that's why we've also taken initiative to start a broader and open community for product management in Norway. We feel that there's a lot we can learn from each other, and by sharing both challenges and how we overcome them. So we have meetups. This is the second meetup we do every month or so in this format. We also have a Slack channel where we are able to connect between meetups. In this Slack group, we also have just started now with a weekly debrief, or just a hangout on video, just to chat and get to know each other. So the debrief this week is going to be directly after this meeting. And we'll discuss basically the content of this meetup and try to debrief it. Just one tip, if you're not speaking, is to mute the microphone. You can hear a bit of noise in the back. I think it's someone with the first name called G, if I'm not mistaken. No problem. And also we are experimenting with Clubhouse. We have a talk there tomorrow with some product people from Finn and Schibsted and Air Things and some other stuff. So feel free to join. I'll share all the links in the chat later on. For the format today is that we'll start with a 10-minute presentation by Espen, and then we'll dig into Q&A. So without much further ado, I think over to you, Espen. Thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
All right, so thanks for having me. Curious to see how this plays out. So I'm Espen. I had product at Kolonial. And for my introduction here, I'll talk a bit about some context of who we are and also how we work, introducing flow, and then I guess that's will be a topic for discussion later as well. A bit of a disclaimer and warning: I'll do these slides pretty rapid, very fast. In particular, the flow version you can read on Medium later, so I thought I'd just give you sort of a fast overview of how these things are, and then we can pick it up in discussion and questions afterwards. But to start off, Kolonial, for those who don't know, we're Norway's largest online grocery retailer, and what is unique about us in this setting is that we design and build pretty much everything ourselves. So the online store and everything you meet as a customer, but also the entire fulfillment operation, the solution technology to do picking and delivery of order, and the distribution with route planning and driver apps and all these things, all built on our own sort of end-to-end data and technology platform, providing an end-to-end customer experience. To develop this, for now we're around 130 people across 7 disciplines in the sort of development section of the company, spanning product management, design, data and insight, software engineering, growth, logistic, and IT. And also we'll have logistic experts and growth people within our development team, which is different. And then of course we have hundreds more in operation, the commercial teams, the admins, to sort of take part of developing this company further. But it's fair to say around 130 more sort of dedicated to pure development. Those people are organized into 5 areas with cross-functional teams. So we have growth teams and shop platform who focus more on the end customer side of things. We have the logistic platform focusing on the fulfillment operation and distribution. We have a data and insight platform team and area, and the same on infrastructure and IT. So this is sort of how we are organized for value creation in the company. So the question I think for today is really, what is our process for development like? And I intentionally didn't write product development because we do product development, but we also do development for growth and logistics improvements and so on. So we basically just call it development. And this really depends on where you sort of zoom in and view the company. So if you zoom really out, you can answer this question on a company level. If you zoom really in, you can answer this question on a team level. So on a company level, which is not going to be the main topic for today, we do have an annual strategy process where we revise our mission, setting 2 to 5 year ambition for the company and focus, and then we articulate annual OKRs for the entire company to achieve. On a team level, we don't really standardize too much. So the daily workings of a team, it really depends on the team, its context, the focus, and its goals. So the sort of the feedback loop and the loop in the team, they sort of create more of themselves. However, on the area across development teams, we use OKRs every 4 months to set that, and we have combined that with Flow, which is our own sort of system for development. So Flow, which is the main topic here, the way we see it is basically a system where we alternate between focus and flexibility so that we are sort of rapidly going and have a rapid flow towards our goals as a company. And why the name Flow? So first of all, it means steady, continuous stream or supply of something, which connects well with us. We want to have a steady supply of value creation. It's also what we built for. We want to build freedom and flow in everyday life of our customers. We quite like that flow is a mental state where you are fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus and full involvement and enjoyment in the process of doing an activity. And this is, if our teams can be in that state, we're in a good position. And finally, for us, it connects tech and logistics in a nice way because we sort of take the best from lean manufacturing and software development. And in this space, flow is how work progresses through a system, where good flow tend to move steadily and predictably. And this is important for us that we are steadily and predictably creating a lot of value over time, as opposed to having peaks of value creation and then, valleys and depth of fixing stuff. So that's what we want to have with flow, rapid flow towards our goals. And we have some certain others key aspects for us when we set this up. I think it's important to share those because they might not be true for you, but they are true for us. So it should definitely be a system that matches our culture, allows us to continuously and rapidly create value. We want it to have our own way and not sort of be jargon confused by, shape up and design thinking and all these other sort of methodologies and frameworks that people read about, but have our own way. We want to strike the balance well between autonomy and the team, but also making sure that we are aligned across teams doing things bigger than what each individual team can do on their own. For autonomy, to make that happen, we are taking the form of guiding and helping the teams out if they need help. For alignment, we double down on an open and inclusive environment where communication is key to move forward. Finally, Flow is a product in and of itself, so we're happy about the current version, but we are continuously improving our way of working as well, and this should allow for it. So, diving into Flow, it's basically we alternate between focus and flex in our calendar, and this is the whole system, the way it's sort of mapped out in our company. If we start sort of explaining it a bit, we tend to think of it as a mountain hike. So if our teams, start out somewhere, the first thing you typically do is agree on what top to achieve. Where do you want to go as a team or as a company? So, which is a bit of a messy process. You find your route that you think is viable, and you get dressed and you get ready, and then you start climbing. And this is sort of where you push for your goal in a way. But very often you have to take a pause and realign, have a chat, figure out where to go, and then start climbing again. And we want to sort of mirror this in our way of development. So we have sort of more flexible weeks, 2 weeks of flexibility, 2 to 3 weeks. And then we are more sort of focused towards our strategic goals, pushing upwards, and then we are flexible again. So it's those alternating between those two is important for us. And in these flex weeks, or in the start, typically by setting OKRs. That's something we do in the beginning for that 4-month period. Every second, by the end of a focus week, we have demos, which is really exciting. Every second week, we have asked the teams to share updates of what is happening in the team, informing the surroundings of what is important, what has happened, key sort of problems and progress. We have a rhythm of flow meetings, we call it. It's basically where you have key decisions or information or exchanges with your stakeholders, the people around your team, to discuss and decide on key matters. So that is a rhythm we have jointly set in place. Otherwise, we ask all teams to share highlights and fix critical issues on an ongoing basis. In this flex periods, we typically in our teams focus on fix-up tasks, doing alignment, doing retrospectives, team building, planning. In my view, is sort of those are the weeks where people get out of their trenches and look around and align and fix all the smaller stuff. And then in the focus periods, that's where you go in again and solve for the strategic things by setting strategy, researching, ideation, testing, design, fixing depth, and so on. So it's sort of alternating between these two states of mind. So finally, it's not a rigid system. We ask a few mandatory things from our teams, but we ask them to set goals to sort of follow this flex and flow rhythm, and to double down on really good communication across teams through meetings and updates, highlights, and demos. So yeah, so that was quickly about who we are and Flow. I guess we can move. You can read more about this online, but it was more about the discussion now, I think.
Thank you, Espen. So thank you for this intro. We'll move over to the main part, which is the Q&A. I think we have some questions that I've gotten in advance, so I can just start with those. And then feel free to add your questions as we go along in the chat, and I'll try to pick up that as best as possible. Before we go there, though, I'm just really curious, what types of roles you have in your product teams or associated with product. So if you just want to open the chat and share just the name or your role, and we can get a sense of who's in the room, that would be quite helpful. So while people are doing that, Espen, I found it interesting in your article. You mentioned that how you came into creating Flow over the space of 3 years or so, each year tackling a specific challenge. I'm wondering what challenges you have now that you kind of view as the next step of the Flow process that you need to fix and improve.
It's a good question. Actually, I'm not sure yet, because we just sort of did a revision of it over this Christmas. So we sort of tried to fix for the immediate challenges. So this would be sort of predicting the future ones. I think, no. So if we look 1 year ahead of how we will be, I think, one thing that I shared in the news is that we were building a new site in Leo outside of Oslo. So all of a sudden we will have 2 sites to work with. And, it would be natural to think that we also start expanding our product to more areas. So with that comes basically more stakeholders and more people who ask stuff from you from a different starting point. So if you're fresh sort of running a new fulfillment site, you have nothing, and then you start filling it up, and your needs would be very different from the ones who are fine-tuning the one we have at Learn School today. So I would be sort of curious on how we manage to do that when we have very different sort of needs for very different parts of our product. It's something we haven't solved totally within the frames today, but I imagine we will have to account for that within the next year. So that will be one sort of top of mind thing. It's hard to talk about that without going into our goals for this year, but yeah.
Yeah, totally understand. So I'm just heading over to the chat here to see what's come in already. The first, I guess, is about debt. I assume that's tech debt. So do you have any comment on how you deal with tech debt during flow?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two ways to look at that. So one thing is, you know, all the continuous fixing, and it's part of building. You know, it's not something you do after launching. I mean, later we're going to fix debt. It's part of building a good quality product and technology. So you have to account for that, I think, as part of if it's a smaller fix you need to do, or if it's a more strategic sort of improvement that you're about to do. So for us, I think we see that as part of the efforts that we do. But every now and then you can also have sort of strategic initiatives where, you know, reshaping your architecture or these things itself is the goal. So that is why sometimes that is brought to the table as these are the strategic bets we need to make as a team. And then it's sort of, it's not some part of another development process, it is the goal itself. And that should be sort of flagged into the process as any other opportunity you want to go for in the team. If that answered the question.
Yeah. So
quickly that. So it doesn't really mean that you have to sort of solve debt in a, you know, focus period and not in a flex period. It just, you know, fixing debt is also a strategic thing to do. That's why we put it there as well, to make sure that we don't sort of think about just adding new stuff as a way forward.
So how do you link that how do you design your goals then, and like the problems you're working on to make sure that they do fix the debt as well?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. So how we design our goals. So, you know, it could be a key result for a specific team within a period. We think about, when I think about OKRs for, let's say, a 4-month period, I typically think about, I look for 3 things when our team sort of propose set up OKRs. I look for what are you going to do in this period, where you are, you know, actually extracting or getting the value of your previous efforts. So actually moving a KPI or, you know, getting business value in that period. So I would look for, is there any of those? Is there an objective that talks about what you will do in this period to enable future value creation? You know, more of enabling key results that are more binary, and removing debt could be one of those. You know, to move faster in the period after this one, we have to remove this. And the third one I typically look for is what we do with our team to improve our team and strategy.
So there's 2 questions that are quite related, one from John and one from Christina. So one is just about how to get started. Like I assume you mean getting started with this process. You've come quite far now, like with your design of your process. But how do you get started when you want to design your process from scratch, I guess? And the next question is, let me see if I can find it again. How the process was for you to actually set things up and come to this way of designing your process.
So I guess it's sort of how you get started really depends on where you are and what your issues are, right? So if your issues are that you don't know where you're heading, you need a strategy. If your issues are you're not effective in getting there, you need you know, a better process. And so that really depends. And I'm in favor of really understanding that problem before providing those frameworks and solutions. So for us, you know, when I joined 3 years ago, the key issue wasn't that we weren't autonomously moving ahead. The key issue was alignment. So we needed a minimal sort of solution for alignment at a wider scale in the company, and OKRs was enough. It was fine for that. But then as we grew in team size, getting alignment also on the efforts, you know, across teams where you need to unite on we're doing research together or we're doing deployment that affects another team and so on, became more of an issue. So that's where we sort of added the flow rhythm, also, below OKRs of actually having alignment in those matters. So I think you should sort of be mindful of introducing process. If you don't have a very clear purpose for it, and it solves a clear goal for the organization at the current state. So that would be my starting point: is figure out what that need is.
So am I
the other
correct?
question, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
The other question I didn't remember yet.
It was about the same topic, so how you got there. So I think, am I right to assume that copying someone else's process, like copying your process now, would not be good, because every company needs to take into account their own challenges and build it according to what's most important for them, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a sort of alignment on strategy and setting focus issue, that sort of OKR tool is like, you're stealing a hammer, but you don't have a nail, right? So I think absolutely do not copy this blindly. Steal with pride like we do from everything else. This is not. I mean, we steal from all the other aspects everywhere.
Great. There's a question about how good teams are to estimate and how often they meet deadlines or not.
It depends how clear is the space, how well, or how much have they worked in it, have they done iterations, have they done loops of estimating and moving forward, or are they totally new. So in many of our cases, a lot of our teams are very new. They own a wide range of problems, and clearly you're not good at estimating what can be done in that period. So I think, but you should be better and better over time until you're not good again. because if you become really too good at this, it means, in my opinion, that you're most likely sort of iterating on a very specific improvement, and maybe there's more potential in you unlocking a new sort of more complex area that is unknown again. You have to rethink the entire solution space. You're caught in incrementalism in a way. So if you're really too good at estimating, that's the warning sign. If you have no clue of it, that's okay, as long as you keep improving it. And by estimation, I don't need, we ship this by 4 days and we have all the user stories covered and tests. That's not my point, but we sort of have an okay feeling of what kind of value we can create within a certain period of time. We understand pretty much we're just getting better and better at understanding rabbit holes, so what can lead to a lot of work in progress, or what it enables us to actually ship. So I'm more concerned with those kind of estimations. That is like intuition of the team of understanding the challenge at hand. Yeah.
So how do you make sure those are actual learning loops, that you learn and become better, as you say?
So again, I think this depends on the team. So if you have a growth team that does weekly experiments, you would need to have that learning loop weekly, and have retrospectives on the past week. Did we do what we meant to do? What went wrong? And then move forward. If you're building our new site at Leo, which is a year-long project, the learning loop is longer. So you have to evaluate differently. So what we ask jointly, at least, is that all teams have a retrospective after the focus period, sort of how well did we do at large, how do we move forward. So at least we have that in our teams. And then we actually have an annual learning loop on our abilities to work with strategy. So we have and that takes a year to understand how well did we do OKRs on a company level and so on. In our operations, the learning loop is daily. They are daily stand-up meetings, and they work from there. So we have learning loops that are daily in the operation, weekly in the management team, bi-weekly in the teams, at least every 8 weeks in the development teams, and then tertially on a strategic level, and yearly on more of an ambition, long-term strategy level.
Yeah, I find it so important to make those learning loops. but it's also part of the difficult part, right? Is to make sure you get all the insights from across the company and actually apply it when you plan your next iteration. So, another question here from Andreas. Do you have one person owning, managing the Flow framework? And how does changes to Flow happen? How's it rolled out to all the teams?
Yeah, so we're in the, I like when things sort of organically appear and you sort of grow from there. So I would say it was entering 2020, it was a dugnad effort. Like, I don't know the English word for that, but, coalition of the willing in a way. Just doing that, and that was sufficient. It was pretty much me sort of getting this together. It was enough. Last year, we matured into a project. So there was a project group, and that project is now sort of is a relay, so it goes from one to another. And I quite like that there are typically PMs owning that, but they get out of the various teams, bringing operational experience, and we actually build stuff like this with a strong operational connection to the actual teams, that we don't sort of outsource it to an agile team somewhere far out in the organization. But we'll see. We're in figuring out now how we can make this more sort of permanent effort. So I'd be very open to ideas on that. My hunch is that we need to make it more of a permanent ownership.
That reminds me, there's one question I got in advance, was if you use any kind of metrics to actually assess the success of Flow, and like how you tweak that and change that as you go.
For now, no. I mean, previously it's been like we had more of OKRs, and are we able to sort of achieve our goals at large? And yeah, we're decent on that, and then move from there. But this is something we have on the plate for this year, actually, to get better understanding of what would be an interesting metric or something to quantify if we are improving on this. We do sort of surveys internally on these things, and our guess is that we'll have some parameters that will follow up more frequently moving forward.
Another question from Mia, back to OKRs. How do you align the OKRs across different teams, and how do you adjust them to make sure you have flexibility?
So the main way to align OKRs across different teams is to set a really clear annual strategy for the company. So there's a main vehicle and tool for that, with clear OKRs that all teams actually need to chip in to achieve. But we don't really cascade that down to teams, with a very sort of mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive framework. We just trust that the teams will do what's necessary to bring us there. But then we do have these flow meetings, also entering tertials, where each team is sort of bringing in people around and that might be affected by these things, and we bring up issues that we need to align for in those meetings. So that is one way to do the actual alignment. But yeah, I expect teams to figure out who could potentially be impacted by this and align accordingly. But it's also, it's part of why we designed the organization. We have it today, is that you sort of clustered teams that are more sort of dependent on each other closer, so they would get sort of more alignment by proximity in a way than having random teams. So like the logistic platform, for example, they are more dependent on each other, but they also have joint meeting structures where you capture those alignment issues.
But did I understand you correctly? Does that mean you have like a company set of OKRs, but you don't have team OKRs? Or did I misunderstand?
We do have team OKRs per 4 months. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is set entering those 4 months. But the alignment process for those vary depending on the team, right, and the context. But we have some structures in place to help with it, like the flow meetings. And by the way, we share them openly as sort of, we have, when they're set, we have sort of an alpha version of them, and we have a beta version, and we have a final version, and that's broadly shared transparently in the company through Quip. So you have a chance to sort of comment and review the others and give your feedback as part of it. So transparency, I guess, is a key way to align in that respect.
Yeah. So a question from Sid. What kind of strategies you use to estimate budgets and timelines with all sets? Um, did we lose you there, or did you hear us?
No, sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, no worries. A question from Sid. What kind of strategies do you use to estimate budgets and timelines with all the sets of knowns and unknowns in the mix?
So budgets and timelines, we don't actually estimate a lot. I mean, budgets for us is like we estimate on, at least on development, is very often linked to a headcount, which we are revising twice a year. When more like rolling budgeting of what kind of teams do we need to be, which is why it's important to have the 2 to 5 year ambition, because we need to sort of plan ahead of this. So that, I guess, is the budgeting part. But we don't really budget on a specific project for like these 4 weeks and so on. That's the amount of people. That's pretty much up to the team to figure out what they believe they can do. And on timelines, unless there's a really strong need for it, we don't really set very specific deadlines like dates, unless they really are really needed. So like take the new site at the Lier. There will need to be deadlines for that, because the hardware will be installed those few days, and so on. But I think in general in our team, they are more concerned with what are the things we tackling the uncertain aspects first, and then sort of reducing risks on those as fast as you can until you're at a sort of a certainty level on all your sort of tasks, and then sort of pushing through. So I think it's more of a sort of risk approach to this.
Mm. There's a question also from Ling, who's in Product Ops at Facebook. Do you have any materials about applying flow that you can share?
Yeah. So applying flow. Not sure. So we will share on Medium more descriptions on the various parts of it, like how we think about the focus weeks, the flex weeks, what we do as a part of a flow meeting, and so on. So I guess there will be further detailed descriptions of them, and also how we apply them a bit in those contexts. I hope that could be a source of that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we basically we do a lot of this through talking internally, as opposed to writing every application of it down yet.
Yeah. So the link you have there up in the slide could be a good way where to start. Is that Medium?
Yeah. So I introduced the system, and we'll sort of share posts on each part of it throughout the spring. And honestly, we're sharing it there also to challenge ourselves to start actually articulating what you're asking for here. It's important that when we scale now that we actually have it articulated. So that's why I push this challenge to the team as well.
Great. So I'll just keep moving down the questions here that's come in the chat. So this is from Yuri. If a goal is set for a focus period, does the task to find how to reach the goal, is that a part of the same focus period, or R&D has been done at an earlier stage?
So the OKR period is really where you sort of commit to what you aim to achieve in terms of outcome. The focus periods are more typically where you commit to a certain bet of what you aim to do in that period to get there. Because very often you have to align with people around your team to get the full value out of a bet, or to mitigate risks and these things, or deploy it and scale it and so on. So that's why we sort of actually challenge our teams to commit to what they think they would need to do within a certain period. And for that, depending on the case, if it's a bigger one and more risky one, we typically try to reduce that risk by articulating, what are the scope, what are the rabbit holes we won't go in, what are the, frames of the solution, and we steal a bit with sort of from the shape up. They have sort of like how you shape the solution in a way, and you pre-commit to what you believe is the right path forward. But this is where we don't really ask for we have sort of templates of what could be written down in those things that teams can follow, but it really depends on the case. So they want to ask explicitly from all kind of efforts. But in some cases, it actually makes sense to be more explicit about it.
I guess this is the larger topic of product discovery versus product delivery. I think one key issues that's come up usually in those discussions is that product discovery is like what you do to figure out what you should build, and product delivery is building it. It's usually a common definition. And there's been a lot of discussions whether to do this in parallel, or to do this first discovery then delivery and so on. Did I understand correctly that your main focus is doing discovery upfront and shaping up the build period?
So a sort of a product discovery initiative can be one thing you prioritize in a focus period. Product delivery can be another one. No matter what of those you want to do, I think it's wise to sort of articulate what you aim to sort of learn at least, and what you aim to do. It just require different sort of descriptions of what you aim for. And sometimes the teams have bandwidth to do both in parallel, and sometimes they only focus on delivery on past discoveries. So that also depends, but we found that, I mean, it is also valuable to have some sort of articulation of what you aim to learn or reduce in risk in your discovery phase, and not just in the delivery phase of it, if that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So a question that's quite interesting from Simon here. So how do you prepare for trips that are more like expeditions, so like bigger questions than just small ones?
I'm glad someone asked this one, because flow and the way we set it up for now doesn't really dictate how long a sort of an effort needs to be. It could be in some cases, like for a team, it's not an expedition, it's a fast sprint. So it's like a growth experiment. And you could, in a focus period, you could have 5, 6 of those, right? At least, and your cadence could be weekly. But for other efforts, you could be building a fulfillment site at Leo, or you could build try to discover a recommendation algorithm for certain parts of a product experience that is more R&D, and it takes long time and multiple cycles of focus cycles. So we don't really dictate that something needs to be fully sort of started and completed in 6 weeks, but we do ask our teams, no matter if they're on an expedition or a sprint, to have an idea of what they will at least have learned or sort of explored in the next 6 weeks towards a grander ambition. And then also take up stock after those weeks to sort of see, do we still continue on the plan? Have we learned something now that makes us want to pivot that plan and go somewhere else? So we do believe it's valuable actually to have those checkpoints after those 6 to 8 weeks where you take up stock and see, we're actually going to change a bit direction, we're actually not going to reach it, and so on. So yeah, we have explorations that we expect take not 4 months, but 12 to 18 months to complete. So we have to account for that as well. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. So, question from Christina: what is the biggest challenges in your way of development right
now? In general, it's like a general answer, and that is hard. I think it would be easier to ask a specific team, but actually, by and large, one of the fundamental hard challenges that we have in our company is that the problem space that we work within is extremely wide, and it could potentially go extremely deep. The customer experience in the shop part, there's a wide range of things you want to work for there, but you could also go really deep and building the most amazing recommendation engine for a certain part of the product, or the same goes for the distribution. And so I think fundamental challenge on our end is figuring out what to do, and and reassessing that focus again and again and again, because there's such a risk of us spending too much time on the wrong area that we want to sort of counter. That's why I think flow is a helpful mechanism for us, is not to sort of be too stuck in those long-lasting loops that would get you nowhere.
It's interesting. So do you take any, so it's so hard to know, you said, so what's right and what's the right thing you should be working on? Do you use any form of like what kind of data do you apply, or user testing, or how do you actually decide what to do next?
So the sort of yeah, I mean, we've tried really to have all data perspectives available in every team. So by data perspective, I mean there's the actual data, which means that we have an end-to-end sort of data platform that where we have embedded and data analysts and scientists in all our teams that can look through actual data. But then you have all the other sort of data perspectives where you have qualitative data with designers. So designers are present in all team. You have access to logistic experts if you're a logistics team as part of it. You have growth people in the growth setup. So you want to have all those perspectives and members present. And that is our bet on making sure that we jointly see the potential, the area of problems to solve, and we jointly make a decision on what is the right one, as opposed to having few perspectives present. So that's our bet in a way, as opposed to having sort of, we all look to Looker, which we do. I mean, but there's and sometimes qualitative data is more important than quantitative data. Sometimes extremely good understanding of the constraints in your technology is a more interesting data point than or an extreme understanding of the physical constraints in the logistic operation. So it varies over time. So we don't want to optimize for a setting where we only stuck with one sort of view of the data points.
All right, so one from Daniel. Do you have shared objectives across different teams that sometimes need to work together towards a shared goal?
Absolutely. So we have on the company level, and then we have, that's why we also made those areas. So very often those areas have joint objectives cutting across the area. So like logistic platform, for example, I keep getting back to this, but getting live in Leo, there's not one team in the logistic platform that will make that happen. It's the entire platform area. So, but then we also have one team. So, but I guess there's a sort of a slider at certain point in time. There's more joint objectives necessary. They're more sort of team-based. In other parts of time, you have to actually pull it up to an area, because you can create more value jointly than you can do individually as teams. And I think it's important for us to preserve that flexibility of saying that, in this period, we actually create more value if we have a joint objective, as opposed to being just, fully autonomous within a certain team.
So that means, how big are your teams, by the way, and what roles do you have in them?
So, yeah, I mean, they're between 5 and 10 people, depending on the team. And we typically in all teams have product management and data and UX and engineering. And then we in logistic platform area, we have really, strong experts in logistic as part of the team, like supply chain and, manufacturing and these things. In the growth teams, we have people really good at growth, marketing, performance marketing. So it sort of depends on where you are in the organization. And the data insight team, in data platform team, we have designers and data analysts and engineers, that sort of product. So it depends where you are.
Great. So we are almost out of time already. So for those who would like to continue the discussion, I'll share in just a moment. I'll share the link to join the Slack community, so you can join our debrief there. Any last thoughts from you, Espen? Any wise words before we?
Any wise words? No, I think like everything else in product, it's interesting to talk about processes and these tools, but I guess it's our fundamental job to understand problems before solving them. And if it is a problem, and if you have a problem that can be solved by a process like this, go ahead, steal. If you don't have such a problem, don't solve it with this. It's sort of an unnecessary solution. I guess that's my view on it.
Great. So I'm just sharing the link now. See if I can do that correctly. In the chat, for those of you who want to join the Slack group who are not there yet, we'll start a debrief there just in a few minutes. I'll also share a Clubhouse link for an event that we have tomorrow, in case you're on that platform and want to join. So with that, thank you so much, Espen, for joining us. I think I learned a lot of this, and I think other people did that too. And I'm very happy that you took the time. And to everyone else, we'll see you just in a few minutes. I'll just swap over to Slack, and I'll share a Google Meet link for us there to debrief.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.